Okay, welcome to everybody. We're back in Sanhedrin. We need to do a little bit of a background here because poor old Jeffrey's been stuck in the Haim for 9 weeks. So we need to bring him up to speed. Let's share the Gemarah first of all. Let me put it on the screen. We're on page 19b. We're on page 110 in the Steinsaltz, and you should have it on the screen now. Do you?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Michael Krause's thumb is in good working order. Hopefully it will stay pointing upwards and I won't go off into Dalek mode too often. Right, so we have been talking about a king. We've been talking about a king. Whether he's allowed to do chalitza, whether he's allowed to do yibum, whether it's considered to be a good thing for him to do chalitza or yibum, whether a king is allowed to give up on the honor due to him as a king. That's the kind of things we've been talking about. And one of the things that we said was that
broken up already, Johnny. Broken up.
Okay.
Broken up.
We've got Michael's in the wrong direction. Tell me when it's back again. It seems to happen right at the beginning every shiur, and then it doesn't happen for a while.
Okay.
We're back. Okay, good. So we've been talking. We spoke about the idea that the widow of a king was not allowed to marry anyone, and then there was because it was beneath the dignity to marry a commoner. But we said that what she could do was marry another king, and they brought a proof from David HaMelech, because we had a pasuk. Well, let's go from here. Here we are in the Gemarah. This is where we're up to. The Mishnah said, no one, ein nosein, etc. No one may marry the king's widow. But Rabbi Yehuda, well, let's go back to the Mishnah. Let's go back to the Mishnah. I can't remember what page the Mishnah's on. It might be about 102 or something, if I'm not mistaken. There we go. That was a good guess, wasn't it? There we go. This is the Mishnah. Ein nosein almanato. No one may marry a king's widow, says Rav Steinsaltz, due to his honor. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Nosei HaMelech almanato shel melech. Another king may marry the widow of a king. And he brings a proof. Rabbi Yehuda brings a scriptural proof. Shekein matzinu b'David. We find with David HaMelech, who did he marry? Shenasa almanato shel Shaul. He married the widow of Shaul. How do we know that? There's a pasuk in Shmuel Bet, chapter 12, which we'll get to in our shiur in about 2.5 years. And it says like this, Shmuel Bet, chapter 12. No, that's not it. That's chapter 3, that's chapter 18. I need to get it up. Chapter 12. Sorry, thought I'd got this ready. There we go, chapter 12. And he says over here,
Eight.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeffrey, back on job. Verse 8, please, on the screen.
And I gave you the house of your master and your master's wives in your midst. And I gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that were too little, then now I would add unto you like them and like them.
Okay, so what is going on here? This is Natan, the prophet, giving a right royal Mishaberach to David, because this is in the aftermath of the Bat Sheva scandal, where David kills or has killed the husband of Bathsheba, Uriah, and takes Bathsheba as a wife. Actually, he takes her as a wife before he has Uriah killed. It's all a very sordid business, which we will come to in due course in the Tanakh Shiur. But we all know the story. And Natan is telling him off here, and he says, in the name of Hashem, I've given you everything. I've given you Shaul, your master. I've given you your master's wives. Why do you need to take somebody else's? Right? And he gives him a right telling off. But it's part of this telling off. We're told that at Neshei Adanecha, the wives of your master. Neshei, what does Neshei mean? Well, it's the possessive form. It's the possessive form of Nashim.
Women.
Neshei is Nashim Shel, which means
Women of.
Women of, or it can also mean
Wives of.
Wives of. So here it's translated as wives of Shaul. And so if we go back to the Gemarah, now back to the Mishnah, we say, we found David married the widow of Shaul, and he brings this pasuk, and I've given you the house of your master and your wives of your master into your bosom. Okay, so that is what the Mishnah said. Now we're going to go and delve into that Mishnah. We're going to go back to the Gemarah on page 110. And here we go. The Gemarah quotes the Mishnah.
Did that actually say he married them? He said, I gave them to you. Does that actually mean he married them?
Yeah, I gave them to you as wives. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So it's the Gemarah quotes the first bit of the Mishnah, Ein Nosein, and of course we're meant to know the rest of the Mishnah, which we've just looked at. And then it goes on to say, well, hang on a minute, is this right? I'm not sure about this. Tanya, there's a Braita that says, Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, hang on a minute. Are you sure that when it says Neshei HaMelech, it means the wives of the king? Maybe, says the Chachamim, it doesn't mean the wives of the king. It means the women of the king. Who else could it mean if it wasn't the wives?
Daughters.
The daughters, correct. So the Chachamim say
a daughter anyway.
Exactly. So the Chachamim, he married two daughters actually, and that's going to be the next Gemarah. So the Chachamim say to Rabbi Yehuda, you've got it wrong. Your proof that you've brought me that a widow of a king can marry another king, which you brought me from David, is not a good proof at all. Because when it said Neshei HaMelech, which you've understood to be the wives of the king, doesn't mean that at all. It means the women of the king. The Gemarah says, Nashim haru'uyot lo mi beit HaMelech. Women who were fitting for him to marry. In other words, who he was allowed to marry. And then they say, rhetorical question, Umay ninhu, and who would that be? Merav Michal, the two daughters of Shaul. So at this point in the Gemarah, the Chachamim have got Rabbi Yehuda in a corner. The Chachamim have said the widow of a king can't marry anyone. Rabbi Yehuda have said, yes, she can marry another king, and I've got a proof. Proof is David HaMelech. Chachamim said, your proof's rubbish. Right? It doesn't work. Your proof is not a good proof because you've misunderstood that pasuk. It means the daughters of Shaul, Merav, and Michal. Now, what's the problem with that?
Do we know who he
I
married?
think the problem is,
Go on, Jeffrey.
halachic problem, you can't you can't sleep with two sisters or a mother or a daughter.
Okay, and very good. And how do you know that?
Because it says so on Yom Kippur.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent, Jeffrey. Oh, I can see you've been sharpening your mind while you've been away. You've not been messing around with your head full of Tommy Rot. That's good to hear. So you're right, of course. In the laning of Yom Kippur, which comes from the Seder of Achrei Mot, it states very clearly that you are not allowed to marry two daughters. I beg your pardon, two sisters. You're not allowed to marry two sisters in their lifetime. You can marry one when one dies. Jeffrey, who do you know who did that? Who married another sister? My grandmother. My grandfather, correct. My grandfather married a woman.
And our great-grandfather did.
Correct.
No,
correct.
great-great-grandfather did.
Great. That's right. So that would have been
Minnie Beanstalk's father.
So my grandmother was the second wife. My grandfather married a woman called Rachel, and she died very young, had two young children, and then he married her sister, who was my grandmother, and then had another two children, one of which was my mother. It was very common back in the day that if a man's wife died, that he married the sister. But you're not allowed to do that if they're still alive. Okay? And that is exactly a pasuk in the Torah which we read, as Jeffrey has said, on Yom Kippur. And so Rabbi Yossi has some pupils here, and they ask a question. Sha'alu talmidav et Rabbi Yossi. The pupils of Rabbi Yossi asked him a question. Heich nasa David shtei achayot b'chayehen. How come David married two sisters in their lifetimes? Not allowed, as you've said. Rabbi Yossi answers them, quite simple. Amar lahen, he said to them, Michal achar mitat Merav nasa'a. David married Michal after Merav had died. Where's the proof of that?
Oh, her father killed her.
No.
Didn't her father send someone to kill David and killed the daughter instead?
No, Shaul did send somebody to kill David, but it didn't kill Michal.
Okay.
It didn't kill Merav. Where has Rabbi Yossi got that from? That David did not marry Michal until after the death of Merav. Julia is looking very puzzled, and so she should.
I am puzzled because I thought that his wife was Michal, not Merav.
Okay, well, you're right to look puzzled, because I think Rabbi Yossi has actually done a flip here, and I think that he has said that it must have been the case that he married her after the death of Merav because of the pasuk that Jeffrey quoted in Achrei Mot. But there is no scriptural evidence at all that Merav died before David's marriage to Michal. And in fact, Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha says, I don't agree with you, Rabbi Yossi. That's not the reason that David was able to marry Michal. Merav was still alive. She was not dead. There was another reason. And this reason that Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha gives, which we're going to do right now, is really super important for today's society. Super important, and will lead us into quite a difficult subject.
Oh,
let's have a look.
It's for Shalom's sake.
Go on.
Well, because David is from the house of Judah, and Shaul was from the house of Benjamin, and there could have been civil war.
Okay, that's interesting. The Binyamin scenario of the Civil War was put to bed quite some time previously. That was the business with the. Well, okay, maybe. Well, it was, but maybe it wasn't fully. But that's not what Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. It may well have been a side effect, but that wasn't what Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha is going to tell us. Let's have a look. Let's have a look.
Or something.
Say that again, Johnny.
He thinks there's something wrong with the ketubah of the first.
Correct. What Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha is about to tell us is that the original marriage to Merav, the older of the two sisters, turned out to be an invalid marriage. Okay, there was something wrong with the ketubah, as Johnny has said.
Sounds like Henry VIII.
Well, he just changed the rules on his to suit himself, didn't he? But this was a suggestion by Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, which has very significant implications for today. Let's see what we're talking about. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha says, Kiddushei ta'ut hayu lo be'merav. Kiddushei, that's kiddushin. What's kiddushin?
Sanctification.
Yeah, the actual act of marriage.
The sanctification of marriage. What do we say when somebody gets married?
Hare at mekudeshet li.
Hare at mekudeshet li. You are sanctified to me. And we say the bracha under the chuppah is al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin. Okay, Kedat Moshe v'Yisrael. We get marrying them according to the religion of Moshe and Yisrael, al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin, by means of a chuppah and a kiddushin. Kiddushin means marriage. So this was a kiddushei ta'ut. What's a ta'ut?
Mistake.
A mistake. It was a mistaken kiddushin. It was a false kiddushin that didn't work. It was an invalid kiddushin. There is a concept in Jewish law of mekach ta'ut. Anybody know what a mekach ta'ut is?
If you buy something under the impression that it's something else, then the sale's not valid. If you write a contract under a misapprehension that it's something other than what is specified, then it's also, in other words, if you're being misled, then the action is not valid.
Absolutely perfectly explained, Hannah. A mekach ta'ut is an invalid contract. Okay, so for example, if you go and buy a house, as I did once, and the seller, who is another Jewish fellow, knows that there is a significant problem with this house, and he does not tell you about it, that is a mekach ta'ut. We do not have in Jewish law caveat emptor. We do not have the concept that we have in English law of buyer beware. You have an obligation as a seller to reveal to the buyer any defects that you know of, any significant defects that you know of. And if you don't do that, knowing that they are there, then the buyer can come to you and say, this is a mekach ta'ut. Had I known this, I would not have bought this. And we don't have the concept of caveat emptor, that we don't have this idea that it's up to the buyer to make his due diligence. Have to do that anyway. But there is a concept in Jewish law of mekach ta'ut, and that goes for kiddushin as well. It goes for marriage, because at the end of the day, like it or not, marriage is a legal contract. And so, if the contract was invalid for whatever reason, then that makes the marriage invalid at the end of the day. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha is saying something really very important. What he's saying is, Rabbi Yossi, you're not right. Merav was not dead when he married Michal, but the original marriage to Merav was not a valid marriage in halacha, and therefore David was not considered to be married to Merav, and therefore he was allowed to marry her sister Michal without without transgressing the aveira of marrying two sisters in their life, because he never married Merav in the first place, because the contract was invalid. One sec, Jeff. We're going to come in a bit to understand what was it that was invalid about Merav and David's marriage. That's what the next piece of Gemara that we're going to look at. Why does Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha say it was a kiddushei ta'ut? It was a duff contract. Yes, Jeffrey.
When did he find out as well?
Okay, we'll see all of that in a minute.
Were there any children from that marriage?
Were there any children from that marriage? No, I don't believe there were. What would they be if they were?
Mamzerim.
No, they would not be Mamzerim.
No.
No. However,
We've lost you again.
Will be in the right place in a few seconds. Just keep talking rubbish for the time being so that you're not missing anything. You obviously heard that, Michael. I return to the land of the yes, good, okay.
Yes,
So the children of Merav would not be Mamzerim, because they would just be children born out of wedlock. Okay, because what is a mamzer? In English, we translate it as a bastard, but that's
Illegal
not a good
marriage.
Yes, it's the children, it's the offspring of not only every
An
legal marriage,
adulterous
but
or an incestuous relationship.
a marriage which is, I think, a legal marriage is a good expression, actually. It's a marriage which is not allowed according to Jewish law. So a Jewish illegal marriage. So, for example, had Merav been alive and had Merav's marriage not been a false contract, and then David then consorted with Bathsheba, I beg your pardon, not Bathsheba, Michal, with Michal, Bathsheba as well, by the way. But anyway, we'll come to Bathsheba in a minute. And then got married to Michal. The children of Michal would have been Mamzerim, because that was an illegal marriage. Merav was the first marriage. Then comes Michal. Who was the son of Michal, by the way?
Absalom.
Did Michal have any children?
Was it Solomon?
Who was Solomon's
Absalom?
mother?
Who was Absalom's mother?
Don't know. But I know it wasn't Shlomo. Bathsheba was Shlomo's mother, wasn't she? But
yes.
It wasn't Michal. I don't think Michal had any children. Could be wrong on that. Let's just Google it. Don't know. Did Michal have children from King David? What does Google tell us? The Agadah recounts that Michal had a son on the day she died. Okay. When Michal later disrespected David publicly, she was punished with a prophecy that to her dying day she would have no children. The Agadah recounts that Michal had a son on the day she died. Don't know how accurate that is or where that source is. It's from the Jewish Women's Archive. Let's have a look. That sounds like it's an interesting archive. The Shalvi Hyman Encyclopedia of Jewish Women. There we are. Anyway, I'll look at that a bit more. I was of the the opinion, I thought that Michal did not have children, which looks like it's right. Michal is told in Shmuel Bet that to her dying day she had no children, which the rabbis interpret she had no children until her dying day. But on her dying day, she bore a son.
In those days, it wasn't unusual to die in childbirth.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't until fairly recently. Let's go back to the Gemarah.
She
Right,
may have
anyway,
died.
so
She may
to
have
go
died.
back, she may have died in childbirth, indeed. Well, if she died on the day that if she had a child on the day she died, she probably did. But to go back to the thing, the children of Merav would not be mamzerim in any event. The children of Michal would be mamzerim if Merav's marriage to David was valid. But according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Koch, it was not valid. Okay? Now,
Rabbi, hello? Question?
Yes?
I was always under the impression that there are certain forbidden marriages that if they take place, are recognized in retrospect. A Cohen and a divorcee, for example.
Not a Cohen and a divorcee. The children of a Cohen and a divorcee are not mamzerim. That is not. It's
an illegal marriage.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't like that word originally, because it's not one of the arayot. It's not one of the forbidden marriages. A Cohen has a separate halacha not to marry a divorcee. But you are right. If he marries a divorcee, the children are not mamzerim. They are called something else. Anybody know what the children? Yes, chalalim. Very good. What does that mean?
They don't have the holiness attached to them.
Profane.
Halal. What? It's the root of hamavdil ben kodesh
Lechol.
Lechol. Chol means the profane, as opposed to kodesh, the holy. So a child of a Kohen who marries a divorcee is called a Kohen Halal. He's a profaned Kohen. He cannot duchen. He does not get an aliyah as a Kohen, and his child has to have a pidyon haben. And I have been to a pidyon haben of a Kohen Halal. Very unusual scenario, but I have been to a pidyon haben of a Kohen Halal. I actually did the bris of that child, and of course that child is not called Ha-Kohen. Very interesting.
Johnny.
Say that again, Johnny.
Isn't the Cohen also forbidden to duchen after he married a divorcee?
Yeah, he shouldn't duchen. That's right. Yeah, and he shouldn't also get an aliyah for Kohen. Because he has he's profaned his kahuna.
Yeah.
So that's why I didn't really like that expression, illegal marriage.
I was always told that it's the mamzer is the result of an incestuous or an adulterous relationship.
Okay, but that's not true, is it? Because the marrying two sisters is neither incest nor is it adultery. So there are arayot. There are forbidden marriages which are neither incest nor adulterous. There is no blanket term in English for arayot. Forbidden marriages is as best we can get. Forbidden al pi halacha. Because if you marry two sisters, or you marry a mother and a daughter, that daughter being not your own daughter. So in other words, you marry a woman and then your stepdaughter, that is not incest and it's not adultery, but it is one of the arayot. So your translation is not full enough, and there isn't a word in English which has that whole blanket. Not that I know of, anyway. Maybe Julia can think of one. She's got her thinking face on. No, okay. Well, if you do think of one, let us know what it is.
I was thinking about Woody Allen, actually. But anyway.
Oh yes, Woody Allen with Mia Farrow and her stepdaughter. Yes. So that was a sordid business, allegedly. Right. So let's go back to see what was wrong, according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. What was wrong with a marriage of David and Merav? First of all, before we go on to that, I'm just going to move this down so you can't cheat. As if. How come David married Merav in the first place? What were the circumstances of David's marriage to Merav? Now, this is something you ought to know.
Well, isn't this the
Something to do with
foreskin
Goliath.
business?
Sorry, Julia?
Isn't this the foreskin business where he was promised the daughter of the king if he came back with 100 Philistine foreskins and brought back 200?
Okay, so Julia says it's the foreskin business, and Michael Kraus says it's the
To do with Goliath.
something
It's
to do with
Goliath.
something to do with Goliath. Who is correct, Michael or Julia?
I think
Michael.
I think they're both
No, I
correct.
think
If they say
Julia's
if you
correct.
tell them that, I'll give you my daughter.
Johnny, you're also correct. They are both correct.
Both correct.
Everyone's correct. Wonderful. Now let's go and have a look at the story. This story is in Shmuel Aleph, is it not? Let's go and look at Shmuel Aleph. What's all this about? Yes, here we go. Now then, here's Shmuel Aleph. So, David has killed Goliath, and over here, he was told. I need to go back further. Here we go. This is this was Shmuel Aleph chapter 17, I think. Yes, here we go. On the screen for you now. The men said, well, okay, Jeffrey, you're back. I don't need to do your work anymore. Come on. Verse 25.
And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who is coming up? For he is coming up to taunt Israel. And it will be that the man who will kill him, the king, will enrich him with great riches, and he will give him his daughter, and he will make his father's house free in Israel.
Remember that pasuk? We had a whole long discussion about that back in the day, about what it meant to be free in Israel, and we figured out that he got tax breaks. Remember that?
Yeah.
But part of the deal was whoever killed Goliath got to marry the king's daughter. Okay, and then David, of course, went and did the job, and then in the next chapter, we've got a different scenario here. The deal was never fulfilled immediately. It wasn't a case where David killed Goliath, went to Saul and said, "Cough up. I want your daughter as a wife, and I want my tax breaks, and I want my great riches." It didn't happen like that. He did the job, and then sometime later, when it seemed that then Shaul became jealous of David. When did he become jealous of David? What was the problem with David that he became jealous of?
became
Saul
more
killed hundreds,
popular.
and one killed
Friendship
thousands.
with Jonathan, wasn't it?
His friendship with Jonathan was one of the things, but the
It was
biggest
the
thing
people
was
singing. It was
Hundreds
people
and
singing that
thousands.
Saul killed 10,000 and David killed 50,000.
correct. Jeffrey, verses 6, 7, and 8, please.
And it was when David returned from slaying the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel to sing, and with musical instruments in their hands, towards King Saul, with drums, with joy, and with cymbals. And the cheering women sang out and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very chagrined, and the matter displeased him. And he said, they ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they ascribed the thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?
Okay. Go on, verse 9.
And Saul eyed David from that day on.
So that is what caused Shaul to be jealous of David, that the people loved David more than they loved Shaul, and they held him in higher esteem than they did Shaul. And Shaul got narked by it. And then, of course, verse 10, we remember this, the Mishagas came on him. Verse 10, Jeffrey.
And it was on the morrow that the evil spirit from God rested upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house. And David was playing with his hand like every day, and the spear was in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the spear and said, I shall pin David to the wall. And David turned from before him twice.
So there it is, the writing's on the wall now. Shaul's after David. And then, so what happens? He fails to kill him with a spear. So then what does he think? Remember this story? He thinks, you know what? I'll get him killed. You can see where David might have got this from with Bathsheba, can't you? What does he say? He says, verse 17.
And Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter Merav, I shall give her to you as a wife. But be a warrior for me and wage the wars of the Lord. For Saul said, let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him.
In other words, I'm going to give him my daughter, as I said, but he's got to go and be a warrior. He's got to go and fight the Philistines. And what's he hoping? That the Philistines will kill David because he's a rival. And then David says, nah, I'm not fitting. I'm only, I'm only a simple shepherd. I'm not fitting to be the king's son-in-law. Okay, so verse 19.
And it was at the time that Merav, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel, the Meholathite, as a wife.
Stop there. So what's going on? Hang on a minute. This is meant to be, he's just said, I'm going to give you to Merav to David. David says, oh no, I'm not worthy. And it's almost as if the king says, oh, all right then, we'll give her someone else. And she is then given to this other person as a wife. So it seems from the verses there that what? That David never married Merav in the first place.
That's what I said right at the beginning, that I didn't think he married Merav.
Correct. You did say that at the beginning. And so the Goliath bit that Michael said is correct, because the potential marriage to Merav came in the aftermath of the Goliath episode. So that was Michael being correct. Let's carry on in the story. And it seems that Shaul failed to get the Philistines to kill David in battle, so he tries again. Verse 20, Jeffrey.
And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I shall give her to him, and she will be a snare to him, and the hand of the Philistines will be upon him. And Saul said to David, with one of two shall you be my son-in-law today.
Stop there. Now that's a really interesting pasuk, that. Because it says, what was Shaul's idea here? Shaul's idea was he'll marry her off to Michal, and she will be a snare to him. She will be the one that snares him. What other episode do we have where a wife snares her husband? Samson, correct. Shimshon and Delilah.
What about Leah?
Leah? In what way, Jeffrey?
Well, she jumped the queue, didn't she?
She did.
Father did that, though.
It didn't result. Yeah, her father did that. It didn't result. I mean, she was complicit, wasn't she, in that? But it didn't. He wasn't trying to kill her, as Delilah was trying to hand over Shimshon to the Philistines, and Saul was trying to get Michal to get David killed. So not quite the same thing. But look at this pasuk. I want to do the Hebrew of it, because there's big problems here with this Hebrew. Vayomer Shaul says, Etnena lo, I will give her to him. And I think we have to say that he's talking about Michal, because that's the subject of the previous pasuk. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. They told Saul, and the thing pleased him. He said, I'll give her to him, and she will be a snare to him in the hand of the Plishtim. Vayomer Shaul el David. And Shaul said to David, Bishtayim. What does that mean?
The second time.
Be. What does be mean?
With?
N.
With. It can mean all sorts of things. It can mean with, in, on, or at. Okay. And here it means with. With Shtayim.
Twice?
Two. Twice is Ka'amayim. Shtayim is two. Echad, Shtayim, Shalosh. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Shtayim.
Sound's gone again.
Broken up.
Okay, let me see the finger. Let me see the thumb. No, come on, where's your thumb? No good. Okay, Michael doesn't want to put his arm up because he gets tired when he's when it gets no good. I'm going to connect the time every time this happened. I wonder if there's a timing issue here. Right. Okay. So Bishtayim with two what? Julia, you're muted.
Women,
Two women. Which two women?
Merav and Michal.
With Merav and Michal, with two women. Titchatein bi hayom. You will, what's this word titchatein?
I will give.
No, what's the root of that word?
Oh, Chatan.
Chatan.
Yeah.
What is a chatan?
Bridegroom.
A bridegroom. What else is a chatan?
Some Torah.
Who here has a very, very wonderful chatan apart from me?
Son-in-law.
A son-in-law. That's right. Chatan is a son-in-law. So, very good. You're very lucky. I've only got one.
I am lucky.
Chaten B, you will become my son-in-law, Hayom, today. Now, look at the translation on the screen. Read that again for us, Jeffrey, over here. And Saul said to David,
with one of two shall you be my son-in-law today.
Now, one of is in brackets, as you will see, right? Where in the Hebrew does it say one of two? It doesn't. If it were to say, what would it say? It would say, Vayomer Shaul el David, im echad mishtayim, with one of two. It doesn't say that. It says with two. Anyone got an art scroll Shmuel Aleph handy?
Yeah, yes, I'll look it up.
Have
What
a look and tell
chapter?
me. Chapter
I've
17.
got Steinsaltz if you want, Johnny.
Yes, have a look and see what Steinsaltz says as well. Chapter 18, verse 21. Let's just have a quick look at that.
Chapter 18.
David Marks has gone off to the Baal HaTurim, so have a look what that says, I imagine. No, David's gone to the Koren. Okay, we've got three different versions coming up now. We've got the one on the screen, which is Chabad. What does Johnny's gone to get the Steinsaltz?
So I've got the art scroll.
Okay, what's Art Scroll say, Jeffrey?
Saul thought, I will give her to him, and she will be a snare to him, and the hand of the Philistines will act against him. So Saul said to David, through, and in brackets, one of my two, in brackets, daughters, you will become my son-in-law today.
Okay, so Art Scroll have the same bracket situation. They can't handle it either that it says shtayim. David, the Koren, please.
Yeah, which verse is it? 21.
21, 18:21.
I've got Steinsaltz here, Johnny.
Okay, we'll just hear the Koren first and then the Steinsaltz.
So Shaul said to David for the second time, this time you will become my son-in-law, and Shaul commanded the servants, speak to David privately, saying, now the king is delighted with you, and all his servants love you. Now you should become the king's son-in-law.
Okay, go back, David, and say it slowly, please. Saul said to David.
For the second time.
For the second time, go on.
This time you'll be my son-in-law.
Okay, now Koren has got a one second, Hannah. 1 second. Koren has got a completely different meaning to Art Scroll and Chabad. Before we go into it, Johnny, tell us the Steinsaltz, please.
I said B'shtayim was for the second time before when you translated it. Anyhow, Steinsaltz says, Saul said to David, through the second one, then he adds, of my daughters, will you become my son-in-law today?
Okay, that's also...
Then he adds another twist here. So then he adds, some maintain that Merav was also married to David and was given to Adriel in a sinful manner.
Right, okay, so you can... Go on, Hannah.
The Archbold has got a note with it that said he was sure that that Michal and Saul, as implied in verse 21, was sure that Michal would remain loyal to her father and encouraged David to embark on forays against the Philistines. Afraid that David might be suspicious that Saul was not sincere and that it was he who had broken his word, giving Merav to another man. So Ashcroft seems to say that he didn't actually marry Merav. She was only promised to him, and Saul broke his promise.
Right, so that's the Art Scrolls view. 1 sec. Let's just summarize the various translations and therefore the various views of the translations, because this is really fascinating to me anyway. Don't know if it's fascinating to you. If you're bored, well then just make yourself a cup of tea, but I find this really fascinating. You've got the Art Scroll, who clearly cannot encounter or cannot sort of think about the idea that David has married two sisters, because you're not allowed to do it, so has said very clearly that he didn't marry Merav in the first place. He was only promised Merav, and Saul broke his promise. That's the Art Scrolls version, okay? Now, there is nothing at all in this pasuk which gives any support for that view, because this pasuk very clearly uses the word shtayim.
But what about what you read earlier? I mean, it's clear there's a difference, but you read earlier, because that's what Michal had said, that King Saul had said, whoever fights Goliath would have his daughter. So that could be, although he didn't say it specifically to David, but it could be counted as an offer to David, because David was the person who did the deed. So he has said it twice.
And so what? He doesn't say which daughter, and he doesn't say that he gave him to her.
No, but it said that whichever version we were looking at, the one that David read, said that it was the second offer, not the second daughter.
Okay, well, yeah, we haven't come to that yet. You're jumping the gun. So at the moment, we've just got Art Scroll, right? Okay, Art Scroll's view is that there was no marriage to Merav, and the marriage to Michal was the first marriage of the king's daughter to David. Agreed that that's the Art Scroll's position? Yeah? Based on the translation and the note that Hannah read out. Anybody disagree that that is the Art Scroll's position? That Shaul did not give Merav to David as a wife? Okay, we're agreed on that. Right. Is that supported by the pasuk? No, it isn't. Okay, because the word shtayim clearly says with two, you will become my son-in-law today. Right. So Art Scroll has invoked Meforshim that have, I nearly said distorted them, but that would be a negative way, have altered the meaning of that pasuk. Right, let's go to Koren now, and then we'll come to Steinsaltz.
To be fair,
Whoa, one at a time, David.
to be fair, he's bringing the view of Rashi. Rashi says, "Shetei not yeshli, but achat mehen titchaten bi." And this is what is the translation of the Targum.
Yeah, well,
so Art Scroll's not pulling it out of thin air.
No, it never does, of course. It always has backup there. What I'm pointing out here is that is a typical Rashi, isn't it? Rashi is one of the typical commentators who is very, very reluctant to suggest that any of our heroes have ever done anything wrong. Compare that with, for example, the Ramban, who is not so concerned about that, and often says
I'd agree with you with Rashi on the Torah, but not on Nevi'im.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. There is a difference. In fact, I don't know if you saw this, David. I once read something that suggested, it's a bit heretical, this. I didn't write it and I didn't publish it, but I once read something that there's an opinion that Rashi on the Torah is not the same person that wrote Rashi on the Tanakh, and that Rashi on Tanakh was written by his Talmidim because of this very idea that Rashi on the Torah is very pshat oriented, and Rashi on Tanakh is much less pshat oriented and much more midrashic and agadic in nature. I don't know if you ever heard that, David, before.
I would take it a stage further and say that Rashi on the Torah is aimed at a different audience to Rashi on Nevi'im, in the same way that Rashi on the Torah is designated to a different audience than Rashi on the Gemarah.
Okay, so I suppose we're saying the same thing in a way.
Although
what I read was they're saying, well, it must have been a different author. What you're saying is that it's the same author but writing for a different audience. But the difference definitely exists. But anyway, I don't one sec. I don't suggest for a minute that the Art Scrolls made it out of thin air. Clearly not. But that's the position. I just want to get these three positions straight because I think it's really interesting. Go on, Hannah.
One question. If he married Merav, then how did Shaul give Merav to Adriel?
Well, according to the one that says he was married to David, that was a forbidden marriage. Simple. And I think you read that out, didn't you? Or somebody read it out. Somebody read it out. Maybe it was yours. Okay, we've got the Art Scroll position. Art Scroll position is that he was not married to Merav in the first place. Shaul reneged on the deal and gave Merav to somebody else. Right, David, Koren, read the Koren again for me, please.
Okay, so Shaul said to David for the second time, "This time you'll become my son-in-law."
Okay, is that borne out by the words in the pasuk?
No.
No, it's not, because that's not what it says. So therefore, you have another attempt by a different approach, but another attempt to square something which halachically cannot be right. Verse 21, simple pshat, simple explanation of verse 21, halachically cannot be right. It's two sisters, can't be right. Art Scroll have said it can't be right, and therefore he never married the first sister in the first place. Koren has taken the words and sort of shmurried them about in their meaning and use the word shtayim meaning two to say for the second time, which is not what it means. But the bottom line there is also that it was only one of the daughters that he married. So the concept of taking a scenario which is clearly stated in the pasuk and is clearly neged halacha is not accepted either by Art Scroll nor by Koren. But they've just taken different approaches of getting round the linguistic problem. Now let's have a look at Steinsaltz and see how he deals with it. Read it out for us, Johnny, please, the translation of Steinsaltz.
B'shtayim, through the second one, in brackets, of my daughters.
Now that...
Through the second one,
So that is also not what it says, but it's probably the closest of the three. B'shtayim. With the second one, you'd really want to say b'shnia, b'sheni. I don't know. It's not quite there, but I think personally, I don't know what everybody else thinks. David, what do you think? Knowing a bit of Hebrew, I think that's the closest of the three.
So could you repeat it, please, Johnny?
Through the second one, the bird is through, not in or with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Through the second one of my daughters. Who was his second daughter? Michal. So that fits. So if you're asking me for what it's worth, my opinion, probably not worth much, but I'm going to tell it you anyway, since I'm the Maggid Shir here, right? For what it's worth, I like the Steinsaltz attempt at steering this away from a problematic marriage better than I like the Koren and the Art Scroll, just because it's a closer translation of the actual Hebrew. But the actual Hebrew clearly says through two, meaning through two of my daughters. And that is what this Gemarah that we have started on today is all about. We've started the Gemarah and we've come to the bit which has shown Michael Kraus to be correct, that it was something to do with Goliath. Next week, please God, we will go on to the next bit, which is the foreskin business, which Julia said, which is Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha's opinion as to why the marriage of Merav. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha does not buy the Art Scroll version and does not buy the Koren version, and possibly does buy the Steinsaltz version. We'll see, because what he says is that there was a marriage to Merav, only it was a kiddushay ta'ut. The contract was invalid, and we will see something to do with foreskins, why the contract was invalid, and we'll see that next week by Ezrat Hashem. Hannah has her hand up.
I just had a thought, probably incorrect, but still. The Yom Kippur service, when the Kohen Gadol is taking out blood, and he counts b'achad, shtayim. So from there, can we say that the shtayim could be the second? Because Michal is the second daughter, and I'm taking it. I said where I'm taking it from.
Okay, so when he's counting, what does he say? He's flicking up the blood, and he says echad, that's one. Echad ve'echad, that's one and one. Echad ve'shtayim, that's one and twice. Echad ve'shalosh, that's one and three times. Yeah, but it means once I've done it, and then I've done it twice. He's counting. So shtayim means two. It doesn't mean second. It could mean the second. There, it's the second sprinkling. But I agree with you, and I've said so, that the Steinsaltz attempt is the closest we can get. It's closer than the other two, anyway. Right, time to go.
Johnny.
Yes, David.
Let's continue the heretical theme. Is it possible that all of these translations are trying to whitewash the fact that David committed an Aveira by marrying two sisters?
That is exactly what I'm saying. And I'm glad you said it, because I am fed up of always being the one who's got the heretical view. That is exactly my view, David. I think it says what it says. And I've just spent the last 20 minutes showing how that is not accepted by accepted commentators, and that semantic acrobatics are brought into play in order not to say heretical things. And for some, I'm not saying for everybody, but for some, those semantic acrobatics don't wash. And that's exactly what I'm saying.
How would
I
you
don't really
translate it then?
understand. Sorry.
But wait a second, it doesn't say.
Well, one at a time. One at a time. Julia, Johnny, Hannah, in that order.
In at 19, it specifically says before the 21 that we're looking at, and it was at that time that Merav should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel, whatever he was, as a wife. It says that she should have been given to David because he promised that, which is what that the slayer of Goliath would have his daughter, but he didn't honor his promise, and he gave her to somebody else. There's no indication there that she married David.
What if I was to tell you that there was a whitewash in that translation as well? Because the Hebrew does not say should have been given to David.
Because you sound
broken up, Johnny.
Okay, I'll just wait. This is quite an extremist point before we
Broken up.
Okay, tell me when I'm back. Michael's done. We'll do a flip in a second or two. Come on, Michael, get that finger up. Get that thumb up. Come on. No? Maybe. There we go. Right. The pasuk actually says, Julia, Vayehi, and it was, but tet et Merav bat Shaul David. At the time when Merav, the daughter of David, was given to David. Tet, the time of giving, but tet, the time of giving. Doesn't say should have. It's another whitewash.
So, where are you?
I'm here in verse 19.
So Johnny,
right, Johnny, what did you want to say? Sorry?
How would you translate after what you've said?
I would say, Vayoma Shaul el David, and Shaul said to David, Ishtayim, with my two brackets daughters, Titchaten bi hayom, you will become my son-in-law today. That's what it says.
Right. Okay.
Right. Okay. Time to go. Hannah, yes. Hannah will have the last word.
From what I understand, this is Shaul's suggestion to David. Because in 19, where you read, but it also says when it happened when the time came to give Merav, daughter of Shaul, to David, she was given to Adriel instead. The article got instead in brackets.
Of course it's got instead in brackets. It's got instead in brackets. Wait. It's got it.
And it's Shaul's suggestion to David. And it's going to Shaul's mind. David doesn't accept it. David says, I'm too lonely. So I don't want to do this. I'm lonely.
Okay, so how do you translate the fact that Saul says to David, with my two daughters?
But it's in Saul's mind. So Saul, look, we've learned in the past that Saul wasn't big on the letter of the law. There were times with Shmuel where he didn't exactly do what he was supposed to do, and he didn't wait for Shmuel, and he wasn't big on the letter of the law. And it very clearly says Shaul thought, I will give her to him as a snare. And further down then it says, with my two daughters, you, David, will become my son-in-law. But it doesn't say anywhere that David accepted it. It's only going on in Saul's mind.
It doesn't say anywhere that David married either of them.
Well, it does. Further down, it says that he brought the 100 foreskins.
Doesn't.
And it says that he married. He
It
married.
does say that.
Michal.
Michal. Okay, he does say he gave Michal to his daughter as a wife. But what you've said's back to front, because if you're saying that it was all in Shaul's mind, and you're saying, well, he didn't give Merav because he changed his mind. And then afterwards he said, so what's he done? Changed it again? No, I'm not buying it. I need to go. So we'll have to leave it there. A very interesting discussion on whitewash. I'm not buying the Art Scroll translation of Bishtayim, and I'm not buying the Koren either. If you want to take it, I have absolutely no problem. I think it's a whitewash. I think that Rav Steinsaltz's attempt is the best attempt of the three. But if you're asking me what I think here that when it says that Shaul said to David, you'll have my 2 daughters-in-law, that is exactly what he said. Whether he did it or not, which is Hannah's point, is a fair question, but that is what he intended, in my view. There you go.
To be
fair, intended.
Yes, David.
Yeah, to be fair to everyone, I think we should reserve judgment until you get to the end of the sugya in the next couple of weeks.
Yes,
because we're not finished.
No, of course, we often do that, don't we? We go down that's one of the techniques that I use quite a lot, of course, is to take you down a dead end. And only when you get to the dead end do we turn around and go back again. So it may well be that we will come to a conclusion of this. But based on the psukim, based on the pshat, we have a difficulty. That is where we're at the moment.
Thank you, Johnny.
Okay, let's stop the recording.